So what I have today is I have just a couple of slides, I suppose, just to set the context around what my interpretation of diversity and inclusion is, and when I talk to organizations, what it means from my perspective. And then what I'm going to take you through is the journey of the DCU Centre of Excellence and how that came about. So as Sarah has described there, my background is in industry. I spent 20 years in industry before I came into higher education. And I came into higher education about 5 years ago and into DCU to develop and deliver the strategy for the university, so for the staff of the university on diversity and inclusion. But when I came in to the university, I had a lot of companies come to me looking for support around diversity and inclusion. And it was really at this point that I came up with the idea of establishing a centre of excellence, so formalising a way for companies to get access to our academic expertise around diversity and inclusion. So today, what I'm going to take you through very briefly is the journey of the centre and take you through some of the work we do and some of the outputs of the centre, and then how you can engage in I have some links then for you to engage in that. So I'm going to start with, this is a slide that I put together that really explains from my perspective, diversity and inclusion and work. And for me, when I think about diversity, I think about each one of us are individually different. And when I think about inclusion, and I think about in particular inclusive workplaces, for me, I describe that as a working environment and a team environment where people feel respected and they feel valued and they feel connected and welcome as they join the team and the organization. And then if we think about, the business case, and thankfully, most of us would say we have moved beyond the business case for diversity and inclusion, but, engagement is a key thing. So when people feel connected and feel like they belong, they're motivated to contribute to the success of the organization. So essentially for me, one time I was asked to present for 20 minutes on one slide, and I used this one slide to talk about diversity and inclusion. So when we think about where do we start, and particularly for most organizations, when they think about where do I start when it comes to diversity and inclusion, most of the time we think about what's the data, what data do I have, where can I start? And generally, most organizations have data around gender, age. Some organizations have some information around physical ability or race or ethnicity and things like that. But essentially, for me, a truly inclusive environment is where we can be ourselves, where we can express all different aspects of our lives and ourselves. And if we hit a speed bump in our life, it's okay to go into that organization and to ask our manager and our team or whatever we need to do to get the supports we need, right? Because it's not a straight line for anybody. But so essentially for me, this is where I'm coming from when I think about diversity and inclusion in work. And some of you may have seen this diagram. There's many different versions of it, right, where it describes equality and the difference between equality and equity. But for me, it's this last one, right? This is, again, part of the work that I've been involved in diversity and inclusion, and promote this in the workplace, this concept of universal design, where we've taken the time to think about individual needs and taken the time to think about people with different needs, and started to build that into our thinking and how we go about things. And in an academic institution, in particular in Dublin City University, we describe this as universal design in learning. And that's a journey we've been on over the last 2.5 years or so of, practical things like working with the academics in different faculties to help them, auditing the content and the way they teach to make sure it's an equitable learning environment. And in particular, a learning environment where people do not have to disclose what can be very personal things about themselves, because we've already thought about what they may need. And that's a journey, I think, for every academic institution. But one key thing for me around this slide, and again, when I talk to employers, this is what I talk about, is this concept of privilege, because we hear about privilege all the time. And most of the time we think about it, it relates to, wealth or things like that. But when it comes to the workplace, privilege comes in many forms. It can be, English as a first language. It could be length of service, which is something now when we think about COVID, for example, if you're new into an organization and you haven't physically met your colleagues yet, that puts you at a disadvantage, right? So organizations need to think about this. So really for me, this is, again, the starting point. This is where we come from. And all our work is around promoting this and building best practice and I suppose telling this story and educating employers around this is the type of working environments that need to be in place to be inclusive and supporting everybody. So when it came to the centre, I just have a few points here. I won't go through all of them. This is what companies were seeking from us and seeking from the centre is, how can we attract talent? How do we make sure it's not a revolving door? So how do we make sure that when we attract top talent in, how can we make sure we keep them and we have the right environments to get the best out of them? How can we create high performing environments and make sure that we have a way to be able to make sure that that's continuous and consistent across the organization? But the biggest challenge they had is, what do we need to do to get started? And how can we measure it? And a lot of the work we would do in the centre is, because we don't compete with those organizations, right? We're the glue in the centre. So we're able to take the best practice from one and share it with the other and create environments of where they leave the competition at the door and come in and focus on, creating those inclusive working environments. So this is a picture of our launch. I'm there in the very small picture there, but just to give you a sense of, so we launched the Centre of Excellence in June 2018. You can see we're nearly coming up to our anniversary. It feels a lot longer, let me tell you, than 2 years for the amount of work we've done. But essentially, this is Dr. Amal Al-Kubaisi. She is the most senior female in the United Arab Emirates government. And she received an honorary doctorate on the day that we launched the centre. So for me and for the university, it was a great honour that we got the opportunity to meet Dr. Kubaisi, and we got the opportunity to launch the centre at the same time. So we describe what we do. We've three core functions within the centre, but there's three. For me, I describe what we do as research and action. So what we do is, we help organizations connect with the academic experts in all different aspects of diversity and inclusion. And essentially what we do is we sit in the middle, if you like, and create opportunities for that collaboration to take place. And I'm going to talk to you about some of those, the outputs of that. One of the key, and I suppose unintended things that has come out of the Centre of Excellence is interdisciplinary working. Now this is something that it's a challenge for every academic institution. Most faculties operate within a silo, and everybody's running at 100 miles an hour. It's very difficult to take an opportunity to figure out ways to collaborate. But because of the way we established the centre, we were able to reach out to different academics to bring them together. And I'm going to I'll show you that in some of the work we've done, just the different faculties that we've actually brought together and doing that. So it does, has another positive impact for the university itself, not just around the outreach work. So one of the things I remember when I went to the president at the time, Professor Breen McCrae, I said, I have a great idea around creating this centre. And he said, brilliant, let's go for it. But he said, I've no money for you. You're going to have to figure out a way to fund it. So I had to think about, okay, how are we going to do that? So what you see here is a list of what we describe as founding partners. So what we did is we worked with experts to develop this model of how do people engage with us, and how do people internally engage with us, and how do people externally engage with us. And this is the model I've shared just so you can kind of go through the detail of it. But essentially what we did is we had to look at it from everybody's perspective and see, well, what's in it for me? Because everybody's busy, and we wanted to make sure that when we set the centre up, that we had already thought about how do we position, and encourage people to get involved in the work we do. And essentially, this is the model that we came up with. So we founding partners, so they're organizations that make a donation to the centre to fund it. We've our academic partners, then we have expert partners, so they're external organizations that have maybe core expertise that we don't have. It could be, for example, around, race and ethnicity, disability, neurodiversity, all of that type of thing. So we collaborate with external partners on a lot of the work we do as well. And then centre clients. So what we've done is over the last 2 years, we've managed to develop a suite of kind of training materials and workshops and thought leadership events and things like that we charge organisations for, and we bring that money into the centre and that funds the centre. Okay. And again, I'm not going to go through that in detail. I put it in purposely so that if you're considering something like this, that you have all the information that you would need around how we describe each kind of aspect of the partnership model. And these are just some of the organisations we deal with and we work with and we've done projects with. And in a very short amount of time, we have created an environment where we are the go-to in Ireland for diversity and inclusion. And for me, I think it's because of the expertise and because the way we've been able to access and activate the expertise in the university and bring that out. And most organisations are looking for an evidence-based approach to diversity and inclusion. It's the one thing that's missing from the work. So there's a real opportunity for academic institutions to bring that out into the market. And if I was to just give you a sense of this is just some of the work that we've produced. So, and all of this is available on our website. And I have the link to the website as well. I'd encourage you to go in and have a look. It's very practical. We describe it as kind of research and action. This piece here, this piece of research, self-disclosure in the workplace, that was a year-long piece of research, first of its kind actually done in Ireland, where we reached into organisations, and there was a bit of quantitative, bit of qualitative interviewing around what would you need to do to create an environment that would encourage people to self-disclose around hidden disabilities. And in the back of that document, what we've done is kind of collected best practices and links to other publications. So we're not saying we're the only publication here. What we've done is actually took the time to link in and other places that you might go, for building accommodations passports and things like that. The Hiring Manager's Toolkit for Neurodiversity, for me, that's a perfect example of universal design, because what we have built into that toolkit is the concept of universal design in hiring. It just happens to be around neurodiversity because we've described the terms and the language and things around that. But essentially, it is around universally designing the hiring process in a way that you're not expecting people to disclose personal things about themselves, and they haven't even got a job yet. So it's around creating an environment that everyone has an opportunity to be successful through the hiring process. And this is an example of one of our recent publications. You can see there, it's not too long ago. Worked with Bank of Ireland, again, a year-long collaboration project with many different organisations, such as the Immigrant Council of Ireland, Business in the Community, Irish Centre for Diversity, and others. And essentially what we've done is created, and now it's contextual to Ireland, but looked at race equality in Ireland. We're really struggling with this in Ireland around language, the narrative around race and ethnicity. We're a relatively young, multicultural society, and people are struggling with this, right? So in us, the publication of this guide, very much focused on race equality in the workplace and what can employers do, is keeping race and race equality on the agenda in the workplace, which ultimately will keep it as a key priority for society as well. These are a couple of this is an indication of some of the other things we do. So white papers, these are very, very simple, like short lit reviews, if I can call them that, some of them case studies around where we've had requests from organisations to work with us on different things. So you can see there's one there that we worked on with an aviation company, for example, around working parents. We worked on another one around exit interviews. And again, bringing a D&I, you might think about exit interviews and think, probably not very D&I. But what we did was brought the D&I lens to it and said, to encourage organisations to track who's leaving your organisation, what's the feedback they're getting from that, so that when we recover from COVID and we start to rehire, that we're conscious over who has left our organisation, and we're not kind of stepping back on the good work we've done around creating that diverse workforce. And you can see here, I'm listing the academics that have worked on the different publications with us. So the training and workshops, just to give you a sense of, these have evolved over time. Again, people coming to us in the centre saying, can you do some workshops for our senior leaders? So we develop the programme, and then it becomes part of our programme. We've adapted that unconscious bias programme then for hiring managers. So how do you make sure that you're minimising bias in hiring, and there's good practices around hiring, end to end. So we can kind of bespoke that and pull in whatever aspects into the workshops that people need. The building workplaces where people want to work. So that's a program, and it's a workshop that I deliver. And essentially it's the A to Z of diversity and inclusion. Where do we start? What do we do? And I very deliberately don't call it diversity and inclusion, right? Because we don't get the right people in the room when we call it that. But when I call it building workplaces where people want to work, we get the right people in the room. And that's very successful, I have to say. And it's a great foundation for what are we talking about when we talk about diversity and inclusion. And those couple of slides that I showed you at the beginning, forms part of that workshop. And we're working on a race equality workshop, really a foundational, just trying to get people connected in the language, encouraging them to create spaces, safe spaces for people to have conversations and build their capacity and understanding around racism and what does it mean to be an ally, and, just trying to encourage people to really engage in things that they probably would have never engaged in the past. And the difference game, you see a picture of it there. That's something that I worked with this organization called Business Games, who are good at creating games. So they're using the metaphor of game for people to learn. And what I did is worked with them on developing, we call it exploring sameness and difference. And essentially what it is around exploring cultural biases and how we interact with others in a fun, interactive way. And then inclusive leadership. So that's something we would do on and off around delivering workshops and one-to-ones, if that's what's required, around building skills around inclusive leadership. Here's the link to the centre. This is just a screenshot. There's a screenshot there. One of the things we do actually is we have every 6 weeks, I see we have Emma. Emma Lou is our communications expert, and she does an absolutely phenomenal job, can I say, of keeping our centre externally. So whether it's social media, whether it's our website, it's, I think we've over 2,500 subscribers now through our newsletter, and that's just a sample of it there. And there's a link. When you land on the website, if you register, you have the option then of becoming part of our newsletter. So if you want to kind of follow the work we do, we link in all the resources, all the publications. If any of our academics have spoken at external events and we think it's useful from a D&I perspective, we link that in as well. One of the things we've been doing a lot of work in probably over the last 18 months is around race equality. Again, as I said, Ireland, very young in its multicultural journey, not very confident in engaging in this topic at all. So we, as an academic institution, decided, right, we'll let us lead on this. So essentially what we've done over the last 18 months is kind of brought together different organizations to develop a race equality hub. You will see that all the resources and things like that are all part of the DCU Centre of Excellence. We launched the guide, which I have explained to you there a couple of minutes ago. And we have established a race advisory council. So for me, that's the most meaningful thing, right? So that race advisory council is made up of individual people who have had kind of lived experience of inequality and not being treated very fairly in work, and they want a platform to be able to be part of the change, right? So what we did is created the Race Advisory Council and built the terms of reference around that, around outreach and impact. And part of the work we're doing now is making sure that we connect them in and start to join the dots around all other aspects of work that's going on, even from a government perspective, around race equality in Ireland. And actually, one of the things we plan to do over the next 3 or 4 months now is to do research. So nationwide research using Inclusio, which I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes, around collecting information around the lived experience on race equality in Ireland. So that would be quite significant, and that will inform the work and the journey that the Race Advisory Council are on. So really important that we do that. One of the other projects, and again, Emma Lou was one of the key people that led out on this programme. We were approached by some of the sporting organisations in Ireland, and also by an expert legal firm who had expertise in supporting sporting organisations around LGBTQI plus policy and practice. And we thought, well, there's a real opportunity here for us now. Let's not just focus on working with one organisation. Why don't we see if we can get all sporting organisations together in Ireland? So what's something that was supposed to be a week long ended up as a year-long campaign with huge reach right across the nation, and lots of different sporting organisations getting involved. And as a result, we created a series of webinars and campaigns and videos. If you go on our website again, you'll see that as well. Videos of people making short videos talking about why it's important that sporting organisations get their house in order in relation to good policy and practice. And these are two events. So National Diversity and Inclusion Day, we're in our 8th year now. We're about to host that now at the end of this the end of this month. Now, when I wasn't in DCU when I established this. I worked with IBEC and a person in IBEC, and we just established National Diversity and Inclusion Day. So we pick a month. It's always in June. And essentially what we do is come up with themes and try and influence what's coming down the line around diversity and inclusion. So this year our theme is on intersectionality, and that's what we're going to focus on this year. And then we established our National Diversity and Inclusion Conference called Inclusion Works. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have that in a face-to-face capacity this year, but we had it online. We had over 280 people for a full day, and we had thought leaders from all over the world, a mix of kind of practitioner rooms and academics and people from different parts of the world talking about diversity and inclusion. But it's very much focused on, again, that kind of action of what have you done in your organisation? What are the things that you've overcome? What have you seen work? We hosted that on DCU campus the very first year, and we had over 350 people at it. So very successful. And these are just ideas that we came up with and then got our heads together and made happen, So again, if they're not in your country, I would encourage you to think about doing and leading out on things like this. And then this is another project that we worked on, the Year of Inclusion in Aviation. So we had in the centre, we had different approaches from different aviation companies coming to us looking for support. And we said, well, why just do one? Why not focus on bringing the sector together? So we have actually managed to bring over 450 organisations across the island of Ireland to focus on it was supposed to be the Year of Inclusion in Aviation, but we're into the 2nd year of it now. And actually, we've just kicked off the research that we were hoping to do last year, but with COVID, we didn't do it. But a quantitative, qualitative research, and we're going to have a published report later this year around the lived experience in relation to diversity and inclusion in the aviation industry. And again, this is a testament to Emma's great work. When we look at engagements, you can see here, this is the state broadcaster talking about our neurodiversity toolkit. You can see there, we had interviews on the radio talking about our aviation industry. You can see here, it talks, again, another publication around launching our race equality guide. And again, got some great coverage here then around the work we're doing around the sport and the pride in sport. So yeah, look, it takes a village. I'm very fortunate that we have a small team. There's 4 of us, but within that team, we're able to reach in to the university and encourage people to work with us to get the stuff done that needs to be done. And then finally, hopefully I haven't hit my 20 minutes yet. This is the last thing I wanted to talk to you about. So before I came into DCU, so my connection to the university is I studied organizational psychology. So I have an undergrad in psychology, and I brought that into organizational psychology. And I've been leading on diversity and inclusion for about 14 years. And what I realized is that all the work I was doing in customer delivery and customer experience and the tech side of the house, I had really clear KPIs and a way to evidence the impact I was having. And yet here I was doing this very meaningful work in diversity and inclusion and no way to evidence the impact of it. So I had come up with an idea around how can we bring psychology and technology together to create this evidence-based approach to culture, diversity, and inclusion. So in my discussions coming into the university, I said, I have an idea, I want to build a platform, let's do this together. So essentially over the last 4 years within DCU and through the Centre of Excellence, we have research designed and built and spun out Inclusio. And essentially we describe it as a cutting edge software platform. It brings an evidence-based approach to culture, diversity and inclusion. We've linked them to business KPIs. We use behavioral science nudge for diversity and inclusion learning, deep demographic data. And the great thing about what we've built is, we get exceptional, well over 80% on every single organization we work with, over 80% completion and participation rates. So you get a really rich understanding from a demographics perspective of what's going on in the organization. And we describe what we do as we combine technology, psychology, and artificial intelligence to bring a scientific and evidence-based approach to culture, diversity, and inclusion. And we spun out Inclusio, so it is a separate company. DCU are a shareholder, and we're just thankfully, about to close our funding round that will allow us now to be able to build the team that will allow us to take Inclusio global. And when we think about Inclusio, we describe it as a social impact organization, right? Our focus is on making work a better place for everybody. And we want to partner with academic institutions. Our background is academia. We want to partner with academic institutions to be able to help bring Inclusio into your country. So would appreciate more conversations around that. And thank you.